Hi, this is Laura at the Lancashire Post, and today we are at the Alice Nutter statue in Roughly, and we have an epic tale today of witchcraft, persecution, heroes, villains, and it is Hollywood blockbuster worthy stuff, all happening right here in Pendle. And it is the tale of the Pendle Witches, one of the most famous tales with Alice Nutter. And today we are talking to Simon Entwistle, a local historian who is an expert in all things witches and spooky.
Alice Nutter is probably the most famous of all the convicted Pendle Witches. She was 60 years old and she lived in this beautiful building called Roughly Hall. We've only got 4 buildings surviving from that period of time: Samlesbury Hall, Roughly Hall, the home of Jeanette Preston in Gisborne, and of course Lancaster City Castle. Now, really, in all fairness, Alice owned land. She was quite wealthy. She could read, she could write, and in those days, women, sadly, were not permitted to have a brain. And it was believed by some men that women didn't even have a brain. When it came to male chauvinism, women suffered terribly in this country. Alice was arrested in April 1612 on the orders of a local magistrate called Roger Nowell. Roger Nowell was in charge of the whole area. He knew about the king's paranoia relating to witchcraft, and he also had read a book which had been written by the king called Demonology, and he knew only too well if he could not only incriminate Alice but the other Pendle Witches, he was going to curry favour with the King of England personally. What we find so terribly upsetting about Alice is that many people believe she was totally innocent of the crimes against her. Remember, women are not allowed to have a brain. Remember, women had no powers whatsoever. Alice, it has been said, never confirmed or denied, did complain to Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, about land disputes. She owned land, she was a wealthy woman. She could read, she could write. She had tenants on her land, John and Jane Bulcock, and they'd complained to her about land disputes. She went to see Roger Nowell, he'd done nothing about it. So she went to Lancaster apparently, and she told the courts in Lancaster, the senior magistrates, that Roger Nowell had done nothing about her land disputes. When she made her way to Lancaster, the words, "It's a woman, get her out! A woman, get her out!" She grabbed hold of the furniture, would not let go, and the judge said, "Well, let her have her say." In one day she won all the land disputes fairly and squarely, but she made an enemy of Roger Nowell in the courts, and he thought, "I need to get rid of this woman. How can I get rid of her?" The trump card up his sleeve, the little girl Jeanette devised. For the second time that day, he picked her up and put her on top of the desk. And then in front of the senior magistrates that had come from London, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, he said, "Now, Jeanette, these 3 people here, John and Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, were they at your home, Malkin Tower, on Good Friday?" Alice replied, "They were, sir." The courts were quite horrified because Alice was quite a wealthy woman. She was totally different to the rest of them, really. And the judges were quite shocked as well, but they believed that a little girl could not be manipulated. Alice was found guilty of the murder of Henry Mitten, a man from this village, aiding Elizabeth Southern and Alison Device, her granddaughter, begging off him. They begged off for a penny. He refused to give them a penny, and he died soon afterwards. Alice made a plea of not guilty, but what we do know is she wouldn't need to beg. She was a woman of wealth. And it was said in court she didn't know these people, Elizabeth Southern and Alison. She'd never seen them before. But to use a modern term, she'd been stitched up. John and Jane were found guilty of turning a young girl from Harrogate, West Yorkshire, called Jean Mead, completely insane by witchcraft. They also made a plea of not guilty. To go into this whole story, Lauren, it would take us a good half hour. But really, if someone like Steven Spielberg got his teeth into it, he would have a Hollywood blockbuster. In 2012, a local councillor called Councillor James Starkey, marvellous chap really, Mayor of Pendle, he thought we need to do something to commemorate Alice. And out of all the books you'll read, she always comes out as the victim of male chauvinism and indeed misfortune of justice, if you will, really. So he got together with Pendle Borough Council, money was raised, and I attended the unveiling, which took place in 2012. The statue was designed by a gentleman called David Palmer from London, And it was actually unveiled by the most famous resident that lived here, a chap called Bobby Elliott. And Bobby was indeed the drummer with a band called the Hollies. Very, very famous 1960s version. Yeah. I would put Alice in the same league as the fantastic Emmeline Pankhurst, a marvellous woman. Edith Cavell, an incredibly brave woman. And of course Grace Darling, another hero, because she lost her life, nothing to do with witchcraft, but to do with male chauvinism and the fact that the local magistrate wanted to get his own back on her. She made a plea of not guilty, and it was blatantly obvious that she wouldn't need to beg. She wouldn't need to be with Elizabeth Southern. She wouldn't need to be with Alison Devise begging off a man in a village that would probably know her, and she wouldn't need to beg, but she was found guilty of cursing him, and to this very, very day is a convicted witch. Myself and many other people signed a petition in 2012 to get the Pendle Witches pardoned. This was sent to the Home Office in London. The then Home Secretary Jack Straw came back with the words, "These people are enemies of the state," and are still classed as enemies of the state.
So that was an absolutely heartbreaking but fascinating tale, and thank you so much to Simon Entwistle for capturing that for us today. It's so upsetting to hear about an innocent woman who was incriminated by one of her own family members, a young girl who was groomed into telling these lies about her, who's taken advantage of because of her poverty. And it's so sad because we hear so much about these themes are so relevant today, people being persecuted because they're different. And unfortunately, this woman, in the eyes of the law, is still classed as being guilty, and it has huge repercussions for people, today when we think about people again who are persecuted for being different. So it's lovely that we can still remember and honour her, and be proud of people who are a little bit different, and stand up for people who are vulnerable.